Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle. I'm with High Point Scientific, and welcome to our monthly stream of the night sky. Today we'll be looking at some of the different galaxies you can see in the night sky as part of our galaxy marathon. Now, obviously, we're not looking at a galaxy right now. What we're looking at is the Orion Nebula in the constellation of Orion the Hunter. I just wanted to take a few minutes to share this view with you guys because this is absolutely gorgeous. What a fantastic shot we're getting tonight of M42, as well as, I believe that's M43, the Running Man Nebula, right next to that. So that's going to be where we begin our night, but before I get started, I'd like to invite you to, if you haven't already, to like this video and to subscribe to our channel for our monthly live streams, astronomy how-tos, night sky news, and much more. Our mission is to get people as excited and inspired about the night sky as possible, and we would not be able to do this without your support. Got a lot of people checking in on Facebook as well as YouTube. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll talk a little bit about our setup, but if you want to refer back to our setup, you can find a breakdown of the gear being used for this live stream in the description. The gear I'm using tonight is a ZWO ASI 2600mm. You're looking through a near-infrared filter, and we're also looking through I believe it is a 127mm triplet refractor on top of a Celestron CGEM II Pro mount. And the program I'm using to capture this is called Nina. Now, March through May represent what some might call as galaxy season. In the spring months, we're looking out of the plane of the Milky Way, where we can see regions of the universe packed with bright, nearby galaxies. These galaxies we'll be looking at will mainly be in the constellation of Ursa Major. Mike says, going big tonight explains the field of view. Absolutely. This is definitely a significant upgrade from our previous streams. Making that switch to narrowband from one-shot color really makes a huge difference in terms of quality. If you're ever curious about the difference between a one-shot color camera and a monochrome camera, just compare this view with the view of the Orion Nebula in past streams. There is simply no comparison. This is an order of magnitude better quality. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to loop a 5-minute exposure here. And this was actually a 2-minute exposure, so the next exposure being a 5-minute exposure should be significantly larger. Now that we have a bunch of people tuning in, one thing I absolutely love to do is I love to see where everybody is watching the stream from. So go ahead in the chat, comment where you're watching from, and I will do my best to shout out as I see it come up. We have Les checking in from Oregon. And we have Mark checking in from Maryland. Scott is checking in from Atlanta, Georgia. We have Lori checking in from Lafayette, Louisiana. Jeremy watching from Albuquerque. Montana, Sarasota, Florida. By the way, this stream is being hosted tonight from just outside of Lakeland, Florida. Mike checking in from the Aim High Observatory in Kathleen, Georgia. Mike is an absolutely fantastic astrophotographer. Keep up your good work, man. You're absolutely amazing. Saranac, Michigan, Connecticut. We're about 2 minutes into what's going to be a 5-minute exposure. This image of M42 that you're looking at was the result of a 2-minute exposure, so a 5-minute exposure is going to have significantly higher amounts of detail. The gain here is about a gain of 100, no binning either. And again, the reason we're looking at M42, even though it's a galaxy marathon, is just to wait for M81 and M82 to come behind the trees. Also, this is just simply a beautiful view. The only downside of using a monochrome camera like this is that we don't get any of that beautiful color that you can see in the constellation, or excuse me, in the Orion Nebula, where you need to actually combine multiple different channels in post-processing to actually bring out the colors. You know, your luminance filters, your red filters, your green filters, your blue filters, combining each of those filters to be able to produce a color image in post-processing. But unfortunately, we don't have the ability to be able to look at the Orion or anything we look at tonight in color. Everything's going to be in black and white. I think that's a fair trade though, because we're also seeing significantly higher detail. Rick checking in from Northern Vermont. Richard asking, are you guiding? And I absolutely am. By the way, guys, feel free to ask any questions about astronomy, cosmology, anything about the universe you'd like to know, and I'd be more than happy to answer it. We have Kevin checking in from Southern Illinois. Great deal. Anthony checking in from Texas. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It is absolutely fantastic to talk to each and every one of you, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy the lovely views we have planned tonight. Mike wanting to know what's the focal length, and actually I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken, 900 millimeters. I'm using an APS-C sensor, so the field of view is pretty large. Alan would like to know, is this shot stretched? So what Alan's talking about is the process of actually stretching out the histogram in your image. If you stretch out the histogram in a astrophotography photo, you reveal a lot more of that signal embedded within the image. And yes, this is a stretched image. If I turn off the preview here, you can see that it becomes much darker. This is what's known as a linear image. So if you're ever stacking your images and you see something like this, this is what's called a linear image. And then when you actually apply a stretch to the histogram to be able to bring out some of those colors, this is what you get. Dennis wanting to know how many years for that light to get here, and that is a fantastic question. The Orion Nebula is about 1,400 light years away from the Earth. We'll talk about light years a lot in this live stream. Oh, we have another frame just came in. This was a 5-minute exposure. You can see a little bit of a satellite going through the image here. That's totally okay. What you're looking at is a geostationary satellite. That is a satellite that is orbiting around the Earth in what's called the geostationary belt. The Orion Nebula, from my perspective, appears to go right through the geostationary belt at about latitude 28 degrees. Mark with a fantastic question. They're wanting to know, what is the difference between a nebula and a galaxy? Great question, Mark. Thank you so much for asking. So a galaxy is a collection of billions of stars orbiting essentially a what you can call as a black hole, but it actually is the center of a galaxy, sort of the galactic bulge. A galaxy is just a collection of billions of stars, whereas a nebula is either a star-forming region or a region rich with hydrogen alpha and dust. And this is again the Orion Nebula. So it's going to let this go for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to slew over to the M81 and M82. Alexandra asking, newbie here, Bortle 7 Sky for galaxy image. What's the best filter you can put on my Red Cat? And that is a great question. So galaxies are what are called broadband targets. That means they emit light evenly across a wide range of spectrums. There is some hydrogen alpha and there is other emission lines visible in galaxies, but predominantly they're broadband. So you'll want to use what's called a broadband filter to be able to help increase the contrast when photographing galaxies. So for this, you're going to need something like the Optolong, what is it called? The Optolong L Pro filter. That should be able to work to be able to help image galaxies. But ultimately, the best substitute for your situation is to not image in a Bortle 7 zone. At the end of the day, dark skies are king, and there's nothing really better than this. Right now, you're looking at a Bortle 7 light pollution image here, but if I were to take this out to a Bortle 2 zone, the image would be a much higher quality. Core going to know, have we recorded every single star in a galaxy or just a small section of the galaxy? We have not recorded every single star in our own galaxy, but we've seen enough to know how many there are roughly. We can assume a relatively even distribution of stars in our galaxy and come to the conclusion that there are about 300 billion stars within our own Milky Way galaxy. Now that might seem like a lot, but in comparison to the nearby Andromeda galaxy, about 2.8 million light years away from the Earth, that galaxy has over 1 trillion. So quite a few. Alan wanting to know, how do you think the Webb telescope will define images this close? So the Webb telescope is actually designed to be able to take really long exposures of really tiny objects. The Orion Nebula is a very big object. So what the James Webb Space Telescope is going to need to do is create massive mosaics to be able to capture this type of field of view. I got a question saying, should a light pollution filter, LPS filter, be used in a Bortle 4-3 zone using a one-shot color camera? At a Bortle 4, Bortle 3 zone, I think your best bet would just be able to shoot with no filters. I don't think you have enough light pollution to be able to... You're one of the lucky few to do not have significant enough light pollution to be able to ruin your images. So you might be able to get away with shooting unfiltered. ATL Baseball Guy asking, what is the best object for viewing with a small refractor? Without a doubt, that's going to be the Orion Nebula, the Andromeda Galaxy, the Triangulum Galaxy, the Moon. Definitely not planets, unfortunately. Nothing small in the sky, at least. So bright galaxies and brighter stars, the Moon, and things like that. Okay, so this frame has been going for quite a while. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a little bit of my setup here, like the interface we have going on, and slew on over to M81 and M82. So we're going to full screen. We're going to pause our guiding. I'm just going to stop that for now. And then we are going to turn off loop. And then this program I'm using, by the way, is called NINA, or Nighttime Imaging and Astronomy. It is an absolutely fantastic piece of software. It is completely free and open source too, and it results in absolutely incredibly easy to use software. You can do things like connect your camera to it, your filter wheels, which we have connected tonight, the autofocuser, a rotator, which I don't have connected tonight, a mount, your guiding. You can also do things like take flats, connect a weather station to it, connect your dome up to it, so on and so forth. I cannot recommend this program enough. It has absolutely transformed my astrophotography. But going back to what I was saying earlier, what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the framing tool, and then we're going to type in M81. And then we're going to load a new image here. And so what Nina is going to do, it's going to slew to these two galaxies, M81 and M82, the Bode and Cigar galaxies. So that looks good. We're just going to add that to a basic sequence. And 1 second. Yeah, we're just going to add that to a sequence. We're going to pull up the sequence tool, if we can find it. Here's what we'll do. We'll just do this instead. I don't know why I'm having trouble here. I apologize. Just load. I'm not sure what is going on here. I'm having a bit of an issue. I apologize. I promise we'll be looking at something more interesting in a second. I'm just trying to figure out why I wasn't able to slew to an image. It's no biggie. What we'll do instead is we'll pull up the Celestron PWI tool. We'll click Find Targets. This is the actual planetarium software that I'm using to control the mount. And we'll type in M81 and we'll type Go to Target. So the telescope mount will now slew over to M81 and we'll be able to take frames here in a second. There is my guiding, by the way. This program's called PhD2. It is another piece of free software that you can control your guiding with. Guiding is basically where you have periodic error in your mount and you need software to be able to correct for any issues in the tracking. PhD2 will do that for you. So we're just going to slew on over to M81, M82. In just 1 second, guys, while I address a technical issue really quick. Sorry about that, guys. We're back now. I was just working out what was going on here. Just turns out I did not stop the image before the capturing sequence before I slewed over to my next target. As a result, I wasn't able to slew over properly, so that should be fixed now. And then we're just going to click slew and center. And so what Nina is going to do is a plate solve. Basically, what plate solving is, it'll take a quick exposure of the stars and judge it against a database of stars, and hopefully if we're good we won't have to do any additional alignment, but if we're off even by a little bit, what Nina will do is correct for that error. Robbie's saying my audio is low. Do I sound any better? Richard saying astrophotography is this way. Just when you think you have it all figured out, something else comes up. You are absolutely correct. It's just confounded by the fact live streaming itself is difficult, so it's easy to make mistakes. Okay, so Nina has finished up its plate solving, and what we're going to do now is take a 120-second exposure, but we're also going to re-enable guiding. So we're going to begin looping. We're going to automatically detect a star, begin guiding, and we are just going to take a 2-minute exposure and see how that looks. But what you're looking at right now is a 10-second exposure of the Bode and Cigar Galaxy M81 and M82. These two galaxies are located in the constellation of Ursa Major. We also have, if you look very closely, a galaxy on the very bottom. So we're just going to take a 2-minute exposure to bring out a lot more detail, and when we get that exposure in, we will correct for any we will be able to increase what's called the SNR, or signal to noise ratio. So the higher signal, the less noise you get with per exposure. So if you take a 60-second exposure, you get a better amount of signal than you would a 5 or 10-second exposure. But if you take a 5-minute exposure, you get significantly better data than you would a 60-second exposure. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to increase the exposure time to be able to collect more detail. Kevin says, I must be doing all of this wrong. I manually locate every target and capture directly on my Canon. You're not doing it wrong, Kevin. You're just doing it easier. Perhaps one might say smarter too, but Kelly's saying, hi all, happy and sad there is no moon out tonight to gaze at. It's unfortunate there's no moon out, but at the same time, if the moon were out, we would not be able to look at the galaxies that we will be able to tonight. So just 2 seconds left in that exposure. There we go. We'll just make that full screen now. You're looking at a shot of Bode's and Cigar Galaxy in the constellation of Ursa Major. Now, the larger galaxy, known as M81, is what's called a Grand Design Spiral Galaxy. This is a galaxy with 2 prominent, well-defined spiral bands. M81 is located 12 million light years away from the Earth. We'll talk a lot about light years in this program, but I want to be able to talk a little bit about what a light year actually is. It is how astronomers measure distance in the universe. It is how far light travels per year. So when I say the light from these 2 galaxies is 12 million light years away, you're looking at light that is 12 million years old. It is absolutely incredible to think of some of the distances out there in the universe. We'll be looking at objects that are older, whose light is older than that of humankind tonight, which is incredible to me. Now again, M81 and M82 are located about 12 million light years away from the Earth, significantly farther than anything in our own Milky Way galaxy, but cosmically close when compared to some of the other galaxies out there in the universe. The furthest galaxy away from the Earth is about 13 billion years old. It's also a rare example of a galaxy, along with M82 that you can see here, that has a negative radial velocity. Basically what that means, it appears to be moving towards us. As a result, from an astronomer trying to observe the Doppler shift of this galaxy, it would appear to be blue shifted. However, most galaxies in the distant universe appear to actually be red shifted. Basically, they appear to be moving away from us. And as you look further out into space, the faster and faster they appear to be moving away from us. This is due to the expansion of the universe by dark energy. That expansion is accelerating too. Many distant galaxies are redshifted to the point where an infrared telescope is needed to observe them, which leads me into a video I have for you guys about the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, the James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared telescope that uses 18 hexagonal mirrors to produce an image. Recently, the James Webb Space Telescope fully completed an incredibly complex set of operations to ensure its successful operation at what's called the L2 Lagrange point over 1,000,000 miles away from the Earth. Webb will be able to observe some of these incredibly distant galaxies to help give us a better idea how things like dark energy impact our universe and help us unlock new clues as to the birth of the cosmos. And I'm so excited about James Webb Space Telescope. They recently have started getting images back from the calibration frames they've been taking of the James Webb Space Telescope, and they're expecting their actual first light of the first scientific object by June. And and I'm so excited for the James Webb Space Telescope. When you think about it, the Hubble Space Telescope absolutely revolutionized our understanding of the nighttime sky. So to think about what James Webb is going to be able to do just gets me so excited. And we're going to be able to really piece together some of the distant, unlocked mysteries of the cosmos. And I'm so excited. But going back to our galaxies, you can see again we have M81 and M82. Now the other galaxy in this image is M82, the smaller one, also known as the Cigar Galaxy. This galaxy is a little bit different. It is what's called a starburst galaxy. It is a galaxy that is being influenced by the larger M81. A starburst galaxy is a type of galaxy that is undergoing a massive rate of star formation. In M82's case, this galaxy is having its star formation triggered by gravitational interactions with M81. And these are two of the best galaxies you can see in the nighttime sky this time of year, located in the constellation of Ursa Major, also known as the Big Bear. Keith wanting to know, are these images live? They are live images. They are the result of exposures. Alan wanting to know, are both these galaxies spiral galaxies? They are not. One galaxy is an elliptical galaxy, M82, and M81 is a spiral galaxy. Stargazer wanting to know, can any of these software suites work on Linux? That is a good question. This software, Nina, does not, but PhD2, PixInsight, K-Stars, and Ecos both all work with Linux and Mac OS and any other Unix-based software, or operating systems, excuse me. And again, for those just tuning in, my name is Kyle. I'm with High Point Scientific, and you're looking at a live view of three galaxies there in the constellation of Ursa Major. We'll be taking your questions and looking through live views of the night sky through my telescope. Again, if you're just tuning in, please feel free to like the stream, share it with your friends and your family, get the word out, get people excited about astronomy in the nighttime sky. It's what we love to do. Jonathan wanting to know, why are there no colors? We talked about this a little bit earlier on the stream, but the camera I'm using is what's called a monochrome camera. So we're just looking at a preview of an image with no color. You actually, with a monochrome camera, have to combine your colors with separate filters in post-processing. So we're looking at a near-infrared image of these two galaxies, but you'll need to take data with a blue filter, a green filter, and a red filter to actually be able to produce colors. And you can only resolve those colors in post-processing. So unfortunately, there will be no colors tonight. Got a question out. Says, with the moon out, is it advisable to shoot a target in broadband? I wouldn't recommend it. The moon is a broadband source of light pollution, and a broadband filter will be insufficient to actually fully transmit out the light from the moon. You'll need to use a narrowband filter and shoot narrowband targets when the moon's out, or if you're in a highly light polluted zone. And just for your information, the galaxy on the bottom right is Garland, or NGC 3077. Thank you, Mr. Rat, for pointing that out. Vinny asking, Crystal from Ringwood, New Jersey asks, what is a galaxy? And that is a good question. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but a galaxy you can think of almost as an island universe in its own right. It is a location where thousands of stars, or billions of stars actually, all clustered around a galactic bulge. A galaxy is a region where stars are born. A galaxy is a region where stars are die. They basically are stellar neighborhoods, if you can think of it like that. We've got a question here that says, I read one of these galaxies has an IFN, or integrated flux nebula. What is that? Thank you. IFN is basically sort of like cool reflection nebulosity that can be seen around the galaxy. And yes, M81 and M82 both have some associated IFN. And again, that third galaxy is called Garland's Galaxy. Mike wanting to know, is NGC 3077 down there at the bottom gravitationally bound to M81 and M82? Not to my knowledge. I believe that's just a background galaxy, but I could be mistaken. Okay, so we've been looking at this galaxy for quite a while now. I think it's time to move on to our next target of the evening, and that's going to be the Tiger's Eye galaxy. So again, what I'm going to do is take you full screen with me. We're going to stop the exposure. We're going to pause our guiding. We're going to go to the framing assistant, and we're going to load an image of NGC 2841. And that is going to be a galaxy. So we're just going to load that image up. Just making sure everything's okay. And then we're going to click slew and center. And again, what Nina is going to do, it's going to point to this galaxy and then adjust to make for any go-to inaccuracies. I just hope this galaxy isn't behind a tree. Okay, so what it's seeing is the galaxy is not inside tolerance, so it's going to attempt to make some minor corrections, and we should end up with an image that's perfectly centered. Scott says, your setup looks a lot easier than pushing my scope around and star hopping to my target. I challenge that. Okay, so that has finished up. So what we're going to do is probably going to need a 3 or a 5 minute exposure to be able to capture this properly. It's a very, very faint galaxy. I believe it's 10th magnitude. And then we're just going to begin our auto guiding. And then we're just going to start with 5 minute exposures. And again, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll be more than happy to answer anything. We have a question from the chat. Says, what kind of filter we need to use for imaging in the galaxy and monochrome CCD for RGB plus HA, and some filters for L filters if I'm in Bortle 7, Bortle 8. Can you use a L filter? Which other filter can I use? You'd ideally want to use a luminance filter, and then an R, and then a G, and then a B filter, and then HA. Pretty much any type of filter will work. Unfortunately, if you're in a Bortle 7 zone, because the galaxies are broadband galaxies, you do need that extra exposure time to be able to compensate for that light pollution. For those wondering, the Tiger's Eye galaxy is, get this, 85 million light years away from the Earth. 85 million. You're looking at light that's 85 million light years away. The dinosaurs were alive when light left this galaxy and reached the Earth. The dinosaurs went extinct about 60 million light years. Excuse me, 60 million years ago. So yeah, again, what we're doing is we're taking a 5-minute exposure to be able to increase the signal in the image to result in a brighter image of this galaxy. So this is a 10-second exposure, so just be patient. That exposure is about to finish up here soon. Juan wanting to know, what is the Bortle scale in your location? And I believe it's Bortle 7. Have the neutrinos mutated? I get the reference. I'm not even sure what that movie was trying to... That movie was ridiculous. Yeah, Kathy, so if you don't quite understand what you're looking at here, we're looking at those bright lights, those bright sort of points of light you see in this image, those are stars. But the object in the middle that's kind of fuzzy, again, I'm just taking an exposure here, so the exposure will, when it's finished, will result in an image that's much brighter. That object in the middle, that's the galaxy. That's 85 million light years away from the Earth. Scott wanting to know, is color possible in post-processing? Yes, it is. Provided you actually shoot with different filters to be able to capture the color per channel, you can resolve an incredible amount of color in post-processing. The downside is that it takes 3 times as long to be able to produce an image. So if you want to take an hour's worth of data, for example, instead of being able to collect all of that data per channel at once with a one-shot color camera, you collect it one filter at a time. So it takes you 3 hours to be able to produce the same amount of data as 1 hour with a one-shot color camera filter. But the upside is the quality and the resolution is significantly higher. Alan wanting to know, is any other prominent galaxies in this exposure? We'll find out in a second when this exposure finishes up. We're only 20 seconds away from that exposure. Again, I appreciate your patience. Astrophotography is definitely for those with a lot of patience. Got a question asking, will M51 and M101 and M104 be shown? And they absolutely may be. Okay, so that exposure has finished up. So we'll just make that full screen. Let's make it a little bit bigger for you guys too. So you're looking at a live view of the Tiger's Eye galaxy in the constellation of Ursa Major. For those with a keen eye, you might be able to notice some faint little fuzzies around there. Excuse me. And those are some galaxies out there beyond this galaxy. Really cool. And again, this is 85 million light years away from the Earth. Ray wanting to know, the size of the object does not correlate to the distance. That is correct. But we can make some inferences. If this galaxy is 85 million light years away, and we can see that it has a similar angular size to some of the galaxies we're looking at that were 12 million light years away, we can infer that this galaxy is significantly larger than those 2 galaxies. But no, it does not always correlate. Have a question about modified DSLRs. They're wanting to know, I want to modify my Canon T7i, but I also use it for daytime photography. I'm most worried about autofocus. If I do end up modifying it, will I be able to? That is a good question. That is not a question I can answer. That's going to have to be to whoever does the modification to your mount. Robbie wanting to know, please tell me why a 2 or 3 element refractor is a better choice than my multi-element 400mm f2.8, even with a teleconverter to make it 800mm f5.6. I think it would be better at gathering photons. To an extent, your 400mm f2.8 would actually be pretty good at galaxies, and pretty good at wide field objects. So I think your 400mm f2.8 multi-element lens would be better than a 2-element refractor. But if you added a teleconverter, you're adding a lot of glass there that's not designed for astrophotography. So as a result, your image quality will decrease. And you also have a lot of possible sources of like noise or chromatic aberration, things like that, that might distort your image. So without the teleconverter, I think you are right. The multi-element lens is actually better. I actually do a lot of my photography with a camera lens instead of a telescope. The Samyang 135mm f2, I shoot at around f4 with that lens, and I actually find it to be better than some of my refractors are. Mike wanting to know, are you using a guide scope or an off-axis guider? I am using a guide scope tonight. Ray wanting to know, how is the distance determined? And that is a really good question, Ray, and I'm so glad you asked that. In astronomy, there's a bunch of different ways we can judge distance in the cosmos. The first and most obvious way is by measuring what's called the parallax shift in the object. So what that means is you look at an object when the Earth is on one side of the sun, and then 6 months later you look at that object again, and you look at that little bit of shift in the image, and using a little bit of trigonometry, you can determine its parallax angle, and then as a result, the distance. That only works for objects in the Milky Way though, but we can look at an object's Doppler shift to be able to help determine its distance for objects beyond the Milky Way. You can think of Doppler shift like like an ambulance, for example. If you hear an ambulance going down the road, you hear as the ambulance is coming towards you, the pitch appears to increase. But as that moves away from you, the pitch appears to decrease. And you can actually use that to be able to help determine the distance to an object. So astronomers basically look at the light from these distant galaxies and look at their red shift to be able to determine, or blue shift to be able to determine their distance. And there's an equation for that that will spit out a result. You can also look at things like Cepheid variable stars in distant galaxies to be able to measure the distance that way too. Have a question coming in saying, for starting astrophotography, what kind of camera would you recommend? A DSLR, mirrorless, or dedicated astrocam? I would recommend a DSLR for ease of use. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the exposures here, and then we're going to move on to our next target. Let me look at my list here. I believe the next target I have on my list is the Surfboard Galaxy M108. So we're just going to pull up the framing tool again. Type in NGC3556. And then we're just going to click slew and center. So this galaxy we're going to be looking at next is 45 million light years away, and it's pretty faint. It's about magnitude 10.7, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge even for this telescope. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to take a roughly 2-minute exposure here of this galaxy and see what we get. And again, we're taking an exposure of the Surfboard galaxy Messier 108, 45 million light years away from the Earth at a magnitude of plus 10.7. Very faint, very far away. Robbie, if you have a $15,000 camera lens, I absolutely think it will blow away a refractor when it comes to astrophotography. My suggestion is just to try. Buy a refractor and then compare it to your camera lens, and if you find the camera lens completely blows away the refractor, my suggestion is to just return the refractor, because I can also speak from my experience. I believe my camera lens also outperforms some refractors. So anybody saying that might want to double check, because I actually agree with you. Juan wanting to know, how do you get better images? 3 hours with a monochrome camera plus filters, or 3 hours color camera with no filters? You want to take 3 hours with a monochrome camera and you would have better images than 3 hours with a color camera with no filters. Okay, I'm going to take a really quick break just to get some more water, but I'll be back. If you have any more questions, please feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer it. Okay, Kyle back here again. So we're going to take a pause on this galaxy here now, and we're going to move on to our next galaxy, the Little Pinwheel Galaxy. This is probably going to be our most challenging object of the night because it is very dim. It is significantly dimmer than the Surfboard Galaxy or the Tiger's Eye Galaxy. But the reason we're doing this is to be able to show you guys some of the different galaxies you can see in the nighttime sky this time of year. There are quite a few. So we're just going to go back to full screen. What we're going to do is pause our guiding, and then framing, we're going to pull up NGC 3180. We're going to load that image. And then we're going to click slew and center. Yeah, Robbie, if you're using a high-end prime lens, you absolutely can get stunning images with it, just as good, if not better, than refractor. I think people are assuming some sort of cheap kit lens when they assume a camera lens, but it's absolutely not true. You can get beautiful images with a refractor, or excuse me, with a camera lens. I do it all the time. I've actually held streams through a camera lens. Uh-oh. So what's happening here is this galaxy is behind a tree. That's totally okay. We're just going to pause that for a second, close, and we'll just move on to our next object of the evening. We're actually going to go back to our galaxy, the Beehive Cluster, M44. And then we're just going to click slew and center. We might be able to go back to that galaxy in a little bit. Right now, it's just probably behind a tree. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Anybody with a high density of trees will understand the difficulty of getting objects in the sky. So M44 in our own galaxy is what's called an open cluster galaxy. It's also known as the Beehive Cluster. It is one of the best objects you can view in the night sky. It is very close to the constellation of Leo. I believe it's in the constellation of Cancer. And in a very easy object for amateur astronomers, you can see it with a pair of binoculars. It'll look like a little fuzz in the sky following the constellation of Cancer. So we're actually just going to loop 10-second exposures here. This is a very bright object. We have a question asking, is this a home telescope? This is a telescope that's housed in an observatory. Mike says, open clusters are a fantastic choice for deep space shots when the moon is out, as well as light polluted areas, and I absolutely agree with that. So once again, if you're just tuning in, a little late perhaps, we're looking at a live view of the Beehive Cluster in the constellation of Cancer. This by far is one of the best open clusters you can see in the nighttime sky. It is not a galaxy, so we're taking a bit of a break from galaxies in order to enjoy this beautiful deep sky object. But my name is Kyle with High Point Scientific. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, if you are just tuning in, please feel free to like the stream, give us a comment, share this video with your friends and family, get people excited about astronomy in the nighttime sky. It's what we love to do. Keith wanting to know, where are you based out of? I'm based out of Lakeland, Florida tonight. Marie saying, try living at the base of mountains like I do. I understand tree issues. I have to go on top of a mountain, but I'm not complaining. I can imagine that to be really difficult. Mike asking if I can zoom in, and of course. Let me know if that's any better. Okay, so we looked at this for a little bit. We're just going to pause that exposure again. Full screen. And we're just going to probably go on to our last target of the evening. Let me look at my list. Beehive. I think a good target to close on tonight would be going back to M81 and M82. Those were by far the best galaxies we had, I would say, of the evening. Unfortunately, I'm pretty limited with what I can actually see tonight because I'm constrained to kind of a narrow field of view thanks to some trees. So I'm just trying to stay focused in Ursa Major. We're just going to go slew back to M81 and M82. David Scott wanting to know, have you ever seen a UFO? I have never seen anything in the night sky that I have not been able to ascertain eventually what it is. I have seen things that have given me pause, have startled me even, but nothing has ever made me convinced that I was seeing a UFO. Tina says, I got to love those glitterly open clusters, and I absolutely agree. Tina Williams. Alik, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name by the way, asks, can you use a filter like the Optolong L-Enhance with an unmodded DSLR for emission nebula to give good results? That's actually a really good question. I don't think so, because a unmodded DSLR by default cuts out a lot of the really good hydrogen alpha you can get in a galaxy. So it's hard for me to imagine that you can get good images, but I've never actually tried it. That'd be interesting. Oops, I don't want to take an 8-minute exposure. We'd be here all night. Take a 5-minute exposure here. David wants to know, what was the furthest object you've ever found? I've actually observed what are called quasars, or basically galaxies extremely far away from the Milky Way that are extraordinarily luminous. And I believe some quasars are a couple billion light years away from the Earth, so about 1 or 2 billion light years is the furthest I've ever seen. Which is kind of crazy. That's like a third of the age of the Earth. George Wang saying, I've been reading about electrically assisted astronomy. What are your thoughts on it? That's a good question because I am basically doing electrically assisted astronomy tonight and I love it. It's really good, it's really convenient, but for me, there's nothing that just beats that feeling of looking in and seeing an object with the naked eye. That being said, I do mostly do astrophotography. Saw a question coming in asking about Starlink satellites and why can't we see them? And we absolutely can. I've done astrophotography all the time, and I've had so many images where just a Starlink satellite or a geostationary satellite will go right through the image. And it is a problem, but I can easily stack it out. You can easily remove satellite trails from post-processing. The challenge becomes when you try to do things at an observatory, which requires every single pixel that you can get, every single photon that you can get. Without that, you have an image, you lose out on a lot of potential scientific data. Okay, so we're finishing up a 5-minute exposure. What you've been looking at is a 10-second exposure. So in 4 seconds, we should be getting a 5-minute exposure of M81 and M82 in. There you go. And that just shows you how important exposure time is. If you take a 10-second exposure, you'll be able to get a view of M81 and M82, but you can see they're pretty dim. But if you take a 5-minute exposure, the difference is, to coin a pun, astronomical. Such a beautiful view tonight of these two galaxies. Scott says, I have enjoyed a few of your live streams and I really appreciate the time that you take. There isn't any local astronomy clubs near me, so this is the only opportunity to learn something new and ask questions live. Well, Scott, you're very welcome. This is exactly why I do these streams, to be able to reach out to people who might not necessarily have easy access to astronomy like I do, and get them inspired and answer any of their questions about astronomy. It's something I'm ultra passionate about. But on that note, I do have other things I'd like to do tonight, such as image these beautiful galaxies. So I think I'm going to begin to wrap up the stream. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to each and every one of you. I'm sorry that we were kind of limited on the galaxies that we could see tonight. There are quite a few trees in the backyard I was set up in, but we did get some good views nonetheless. These views, I think, right now are some of the best we got of the entire night. Again, we looked at the Surfboard Galaxy, we looked at the Little Pinwheel Galaxy, we looked at Bowden Cigar Galaxy. If it was a little higher, we would have also looked at M51 and other galaxies like that. But it is what it is. I think this turned out pretty good, and I'm so thankful that each and every one of you tuned in to enjoy these views of the nighttime sky. But until next time, our next live stream, my name is Kyle, I'm with High Point Scientific, and always remember to keep looking up.